just starting you off a little slow-mo Tom Brady. Why not? Week 13, though.
He wasn't yelling.
No, he wasn't. He looked very calm there. Week 13, though, very uncharacteristic. We had Rob Gronkowski dishing out a dirty hit. And honestly, Robin, what is the best way for Geno Smith and Rex Ryan to settle their beef? I'm thinking octagon, maybe arm wrestling contest.
Yeah, I mean,
chicken wing eating contest.
If you're Geno Smith, really the best way is to play well and make Rex Ryan talk about you playing well. But for the fun of things, sure, a little arm wrestling, chicken wing eating would probably work.
I like it. Hey, welcome to SI Now. Let's introduce us. I'm Maggie. That's Robin. This is Tiki Barber, the Pro Bowl running back, formerly of your New York Giants, now CBS Sports Radio's Tiki and Tierney show. All right, let's first talk about Rob Gronkowski. We saw there with the slow-mo Tom Brady. Usually, Gronk's antics are crushing Bud Lights on the party bus. This was not the same. Obviously, lays the elbow into rookie corner Tre'Davious White. Gronk not known for these dirty hits. What should the penalty be for this?
He'll get a fine. It'll be
not a suspension.
No, it won't be suspended because there's no history here. Like when you think about guys in the National Football League who get suspended for on-field behavior, it's when it's repeated on-field behavior, things that they've done to run afoul of the league year over year over year. Gronk's not that guy. I mean, he's a fun-loving stud. He gets frustrated, and that's why this kind of came out. He was clearly fouled on this play with Tre'Davious White. He grabbed him the whole way across the field, pulled him, pushed him a couple times, and so he took it out on him by suplexing him or going down on the field on him. And the problem is, and the reason this feels egregious, is because White had a concussion and had to leave the game afterwards. He'll get fined $20-something thousand, and then on appeal it'll be $15,000, and it's nothing.
We've seen little pileups before, but what stood out about this to me was he kind of drove his arm into his head and did send him into the concussion protocol. So if I'm just judging the incidents, for instance, this is much more serious to me than Crabtree and Talib, who are sort of skirmishing. Yeah, it's embarrassing, but this is much more dangerous. Well, why not a suspension like that one?
Because of the history. Crabtree and Aqib Talib had a history. I mean, I don't think they were warned before the game last weekend that they shouldn't get into a fight, but they did. And the same thing. He pulled his chain, and they started throwing fisticuffs. Even when it calmed down, they started fighting again on the sideline. Gronk is not this player. Yes, it looks egregious in a vacuum, but what the league always does is judge over a length of time. Vontaze Burfict is the perfect example of a guy who could do something less benign, less malignant than this, and get suspended because of his history.
People will bring this up, though. They'll say, listen, Rob Gronkowski is playing by a different set of rules than everyone else in the league, and that's usually what I was talking about, crushing the Bud Lights on the party bus. People allow him to be the sort of knucklehead, sort of friendly.
Off the field.
Off the field. Usually on the field, we've never seen anything like this. So, yes, there is no history. But to the idea that Gronk is somehow, there's a double standard between him and every other player in the league.
I don't think there's a double standard. I think that Gronk does things the right way on the football field, and he's fun-loving off of it. It's his brand. It's on purpose. It's not, I mean, he probably is this way to an extent, but it's promoted because that's what he wants his brand to be. And you see it with everything that he does with his social media and everything else. But on the field, he's been the consummate professional and champion. And I think that's how he gets judged. And that's what the league ultimately judges him on, is how does he react and behave as a football player, not all the things that go on off the field.
Do you think there's any chance he's perceived a little bit differently post this sort of move on the field?
I mean, maybe, unless if he does something again, I'm sure, but he won't all of a sudden have a dirty narrative about him.
Okay, this guy, Chris, says only a small fine. If he gets suspended, that's foolish. Come on, Gronk's not a punk player.
He's not.
Okay.
But I don't think he's a punk player either, but on the act, I would suspend him.
No, they won't.
Meanwhile,
it's all based on history.
The Seahawks reminded everyone they are a team to be reckoned with on Sunday night, dispatching the Eagles 24-10, and Russell Wilson continues to be everything for them on offense, making him our adrenaline performer presented by Toyota. Wilson outplayed counterpart Carson Wentz and was 20 of 31 for 227 yards and 3 touchdowns with no picks. He added 31 yards on the ground. His 15 TD passes in the fourth quarter tie him for the most ever in a single season. And going into the game, Wilson had already accounted for 86% of the Seahawks scrimmage yards, the highest percentage of any player in the Super Bowl era. Tiki, are you surprised how he and Seattle handled the Eagles?
Well, this game was tight until the end. And obviously, the last drive where he's third down and he's scrambling and he gets 6 yards down the field and then he laterals it to his running back. It's like, what? Who the heck does that in the National Football League and gets away with it? He's a magician, Russell Wilson. So am I surprised? No, because first of all, It is very difficult to go to CenturyLink and play. It's loud. The fan base is aggressive. You can't hear anything, whether it's on the field, in the huddle, in the sideline. You can't hear. And so Carson Wentz had a great challenge. But I think the biggest thing that happened in this game for Seattle, Russell Wilson notwithstanding, because he's amazing every week, and 80-90% of their offense, it's not sustainable, I would have said a month ago, but he does it every week. So their defensive front seven was amazing in stopping what the Eagles have done really well this year, which is run the ball, stay regular on first and second down, which allows Carson Wentz to just do whatever he wants on third down, right? And so by shutting down their run game, it put Carson Wentz in all right, kid, you got to win it yourself with your arm and make some difficult throws in tight coverage, despite the fact that they're missing a couple guys in their secondary. So as much as this was about Russell Wilson, and it always will be because that's how Seattle wins, their defense actually stepped up, even though they're wounded with a couple of guys out.
It's a great point because we keep harping on the fact that the Legion of Boom is no longer and they're injured, but you're right, that defensive front, I mean, LeGarrette Blount not able to get anything going. J.H.I. obviously is great, but not enough. Okay, so the Seattle wins this week. Other NFC teams that won in a big way. The Vikings on the road against Atlanta. New Orleans beat a division rival in Carolina. The Rams blew out the Cardinals, another division rival. Who's the best team in the NFC?
I mean, I'm probably still going to say the Philadelphia Eagles just because of how hard it is to go and win out in Seattle. But Minnesota's making a strong case. Their defense is top 5. Case Keenum, we talk about every single week. Effective. He doesn't make mistakes that cost his team wins. And it's hard to go on the road in Atlanta where it's loud. It's a team is on the come recently and win that football game. It was ugly, but they won it. And that's what it comes down to. You have to win games on the road. And so Minnesota's right there, but I'm still going to say it's the Philadelphia Eagles just because of their body of work over the course of the year, where they sit offensively with their defense, not giving up a touchdown until this week, by the way, in the first quarter. Their run game, which is top 3 or 4 in the National Football League, and how Carson Wentz has been MVP-like all season long.
Now, we were just talking about him, but when you say the word value, it's difficult for me not to put Russell Wilson right at the top of the MVP conversation,
no doubt.
Seeing what he does for that offense. Who's your MVP right now?
I mean, it sucks to say this, but it's Tom Brady, man. I mean, he's leading the league in passing. The last couple of weeks, the last 4 weeks, obviously they won 8 in a row, but their last 4 weeks, they've scored 132 points. 132 points, 33 points a game, and their defense on the other side of this has only given up about 44 points. So, I mean, he's done exactly what you want to do. When your defense struggles early, you just outscore the team. And then when your defense finally catches up, as we know a Bill Belichick defense ultimately will, you just don't make mistakes and you win tough games. Against the Buffalo Bills this weekend, we saw it. They were out of sync early. It's what led to the conversation on the sideline with Josh McDaniels, his offensive coordinator.
Screaming match.
We'll call it a conversation. But they were getting points, right? They were getting close into the red zone. They weren't scoring touchdowns, but they were getting points slowly, meticulously, chipping away at the Buffalo Bills. And then ultimately, they get 2 big touchdowns and put this game out of reach. And so it's all on Tom Brady. He keeps his composure no matter
except on the side.
Except with
on the field, it's fine.
On the field, he keeps his composure, and he just does what he always does and wins. And now they're sitting here at 10-2. They're going to win the division again and get a bye again going into the postseason.
Amazing. Looking more of these Facebook Live comments. Pure effing Patriots move. Thank you, Ryan, for that one. I can't say those words, though, on the air. Okay, let's talk about the Giants.
Well, do we?
Your former team. Where to begin? Let's start here.
Okay.
Multiple outlets reporting that Ben McAdoo could be fired today.
Yeah.
First of all, do you think that's going to happen?
I don't think it's going to happen.
Why not?
It's just not the way the Giants do things. And I told you this story a couple of weeks ago when 2003, the year before Coach Coughlin came, and Jim Fossil was our coach. Similar, it wasn't even as bad as this, but the Giants had decided to move on early in the season. We had a team meeting. Jim Fossil comes in, sits us down. He says, look, this is going to be my last year, but I'm going to coach out the rest of the season. Willington Mara came in not too soon after him and said, everybody look at yourself, look to your right, look to your left. There's only going to be one of you here next year. You're playing for your jobs basically now, and that's how the Giants do things. They keep things in house and keep it classy, so to speak. So I don't think they'll fire him mid-season. If they did, they'd go with Spags, which really isn't a firing. It's kind of just a reassessing of the play calling going forward.
Yeah, defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo, who's got some head coaching experience, didn't go that well in St. Louis for him, but he does have experience. So let's say they, for argument's sake, that the Giants do make a change at head coach. What does that mean for Eli? Does he get inserted back into the starting lineup? Do you go straight to Davis Webb?
Well, it would be on whoever is the interim coach.
Say it's Spags, you know him.
If it's Spags, yeah, I would guess they'd go back to Eli Manning as their starting quarterback.
Wow.
It's interesting, like the roller coaster that's potentially in front of us if you're a New York Giant fan. Because you looked at this game last weekend against the Oakland Raiders. Geno wasn't bad, but Geno was Geno. He's horrible with ball security. 53 turnovers he's had in his career, and a lot of those are sack fumbles, which is what we saw with Khalil Mack going into halftime. If they score a touchdown or even just kick a field goal, it feels like a different game. But the inefficiencies, the 4 3-and-outs and 7 drives in the first half, those type of things, that's exactly what Eli was doing. It's not any different. And so you don't look at Geno and say, yeah, this was the right move. It maybe felt better because he threw some good passes. When the pockets collapsed, he was good moving out of the pocket, throwing on the run. He's got good arm talent, and he's mobile. But he's not the answer. And just like Eli wasn't the problem.
Okay, so Davis Webb then, we expect that he's going to have to play the third-round rookie out of Cal.
At some point.
Right, he's going to have to play at some point. Maybe against the Dallas Cowboys this weekend?
Maybe. I don't know if they'll announce him as the starter. I mean, the issue, and this is a deeper issue than what's happening on the field. Because the one thing that the Giants can't stand, and this is Mara's and the Tish's, the ownership there, is that if our stadium is 80% Cowboys fans, and Cowboys fans will travel, and the Cowboys have a chance after winning last weekend against the Washington Redskins. They're not out of this thing yet, so their fans are going to be invigorated, and they will travel. Not to mention that there's probably a million of them here anyways in New Jersey, and so you don't want that stadium to look like a Cowboys home game. So that's what you worry about.
Okay.
And if you say Davis Webb is going to start, I mean, who's engaged as a Giant?
Well, you might want to see what the future of the franchise could look like, right?
He's not the future.
He's right about Cowboys fans in Jersey.
Yeah.
Once they started winning again, they started popping up and multiplying like gremlins who get wet after midnight. Whoop, whoop, whoop.
We haven't seen much of Davis Webb, but there's a reason that Geno Smith, who was out, I mean, he was basically out of the game, comes into New York and is the backup. That tells you something about Davis Webb. He's not the answer. Well, I think we know that. They want to get a look at him just to know if they need to draft Sam Darnold in the first round because they're going to be a 2 or 3 pick this year. But he's not the answer.
Yeah, very interesting. Interesting to see how they navigate the next few weeks of the season because the microscope is clearly on the New York Giants. Now, there also was a report that former Giants players, you are a former Giants great, we're going to show up with Eli Manning jerseys on next week as a show of solidarity.
We would love to do that.
Have you been contacted about this?
You know license plate guy, Joe Roebuck from huge Giants
famous fan.
Huge fan. I was on this Facebook feed with him and a bunch of fans talking about that. And one of the guys said, this came up obviously, one of the guys said, there is no blanking way the Giants are letting former players stand on the sideline with a number 10 jerseys on. It'd be awesome, and I think guys would be behind it. But it's just a bad look. It would continue the bad PR. You know, as I thought about this and spent the weekend talking to a lot of Giants fans, the way that this could have been handled and should have been handled, because I'm in agreement that it needed to happen.
Sure.
John Mara should have announced that this was going to happen. It's unprecedented, right? An owner standing up and saying, we're moving on from our starting quarterback. But and people would ask many times, well, how else would you have done it? That's the only way to do it with a guy who's an icon like Eli. Forget what people think he's worth or where he's been ranked over the last, decade and a half as a quarterback in the National Football League. He's an icon in New York, and you don't treat him that way. You don't make a decision that feels like, oh, Janoris Jenkins got suspended today. Or DRC got suspended today. That's what that announcement felt like. And it was just disrespectful to a guy like Eli Manning.
Yeah, well, this is one thing I said. It said it's a shame that someone who means so much to the organization is being benched by someone who means so little.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's the best way to put it.
Now, after losing to the Jets, the Chiefs, they've achieved a unique distinction. They're the only team to lose to both the Jets and the Giants this year. Give it up to the Chiefs. Andy Reid's team has now dropped 6 of 7 games. Any chance his name is mentioned amongst coaches on the hot seat?
I mean, it'll get mentioned by those who don't know what's going on, but he's not on the hot seat. They have a quarterback issue, but more effectively, they have a defensive issue.
Yeah.
This defense has been bad. I mean, they got off to a good start against the Jets. 2 quick touchdowns. Travis Kelce looked like Travis Kelce again. I was like, man, Kansas City, they feel it. They knew the pressure was on, but then their defense couldn't sustain it. Very quickly, it was a tie ball game, and going down the stretch, I mean, one of the highest scoring games in the National Football League, Jets, Kansas City, you wouldn't have thought that. Both of these teams' defenses let them down. Is he on the hot seat? No, but they need a correction, or they need some, I think, more experience, because they're odd in their defense. There's some really old guys like Derek Johnson, but there's some really young guys like Marcus Peters, who was a little bit emotional in that game as well. There's a mixing and a matching that's not cohesive right now on the defensive side of the ball.
I saw someone tweet out, that's really disrespecting the flag. What Marcus Peters did, which was pick it up and throw it into 20 yards.
That's a heck of a souvenir.
20 rows into the stands. Yeah, you don't usually get those.
No.
Meanwhile, we hardly recognize the AFC West from where the season started. Now, this comes courtesy of Peter King, who took a closer look at the division in today's Monday morning quarterback. After one quarter of the season, this was what the AFC West looked like. Take a look at the records there. Now, over the past 2 months, the Chargers have gone 6-2. Wow. They're in a 3-way tie with Kansas City and Oakland now at 6-6, while Denver's lost 8 straight. Now, look at where we are. It's not so pretty. How much confidence, Tiki, do you have that the hottest team in this division, clearly the Chargers, can win this division?
Well, I think it's got to be the Chargers that you look at. Kansas City is just on a slide that they can't get off, right? It's got to get off the slide now. It's time to get off the playground. They can't. They're just going down this slide. The Oakland Raiders, while playing okay of late, they got 3 of their remaining 4 games are on the road, including next week against the Kansas City Chiefs, and the one game that they have at home is against the Dallas Cowboys. And so I'm looking at the team that's going to come out of this is likely the Chargers, simply because of how good they've been playing as of late. Phillip Rivers is their quarterback. It just feels like this might be his time, and nobody else is standing up to claim it in the West.
Super Bowl contender?
No, not a Super Bowl contender. I mean, the Steelers are great. We're going to see them tomorrow night, or actually tonight, against the Bengals. And New England is just, I mean, they're New England again. They're going to be right back in the AFC Championship game. You feel it.
Speaking of maybe sneaky Super Bowl contenders, Aaron Rodgers was back at practice Saturday.
Yeah.
Eligible Week 15 to return. How seriously?
R-E-L-A-S?
There you go.
Is that what you're saying?
How seriously should we be taking his return in the Packers?
Look, they have a winnable game this weekend, which they'll probably win against the Cleveland Browns. But then they play the Carolina Panthers, who have a very good defense, and they play the Minnesota Vikings, who have a very good defense. If there is any chance that Aaron Rodgers is going to get hit and hurt again, because it's a broken bone and a throwing shoulder, and those 2 guys get after the quarterback, talking about the Panthers and the Minnesota Vikings, then you can't risk it, because then you end up putting him at risk going forward in future years. We saw this with Tony Romo. Tony Romo had those continuous clavicle fractures. They take a toll on you, and it throws you off your game. So unless, people start collapsing in the NFC, which I don't see happening. The NFC is the stronger of the 2 conferences this year. Atlanta, even though they lost this weekend, they're still viable. Seattle, now at 8-4, they're viable as well. There's just too many, I think, steps for them to climb in order to get in, to risk taking a shot on Aaron Rodgers getting hurt again.
Tiki, really appreciate it. Meanwhile, in our Facebook Live mentions here, hashtag Russell Wilson for MVP, really heating up. Thank you guys so much, and thank you, Tiki.
Always.
The college football playoff semifinals are set. What'd you think about them? Clemson, Oklahoma, Georgia, Alabama. Pete Mundo, our college football analyst, is here. Obviously, the biggest controversy is how Alabama got into the top 4. The Tide Are they worth it? I mean, are they a top 4 team, and should they be playing in the college football playoff?
Outside of the fact that they're Alabama, Maggie, this is not a top 4 team. This was not a top 4 resume. This was based on one thing. It's Alabama. And we can be told all last week and all this week, it's not about the brand, it's not about the team or the program. This was the best example of it being exactly about the program. You compare these two teams, it wasn't close. When you think of Alabama, 9 Power 5 conference games. Ohio State had 11. Ohio State was a conference champion. The one thing they had against them was 2 losses. If they didn't have that Oklahoma game and they had scheduled an FCS team or a MAC team and blew out Toledo 55-10, they'd be 12-1, a Big Ten champion. Yeah, the Iowa loss was ugly, but that would have been the end of the discussion. It would have been Ohio State. And that Oklahoma game, that loss in particular, I don't think it was nearly as bad as it looked. It was a 4-point game going into the fourth quarter. You lose to the number 2 team in the country by double digits. It's a 4-point game after 3 quarters. That's a bad loss. I'm sorry. They really screwed this thing up.
Okay, but if you want to say this goes back to Alabama being Alabama, the brand recognition, could you also say, well, Ohio State got in last year by not being a conference champion, and they got the doors blown off of them by Clemson, and maybe the committee thought, we're not going to give Ohio State the benefit of the doubt again.
I'm fine with that, but you have to look at college football as it's so year to year. I know a lot of the big players were back, J.T. Barrett, et cetera, but you can't go on what a team did last year in college football when there's so much turnover. You have to use it specifically year to year. That was part of the whole human element of having a college football playoff, of having a committee involved where these guys could look past what happened last year in a college football playoff game. So I just don't think that really works.
I guess I'm saying reputation to reputation.
Absolutely, they're even. The reputations are totally even. I just think the committee felt like with their eye test, whatever that means, Alabama was better. And I don't think you can go about it that way. The resume has to be worth something.
So if you're Ohio State, do you start erasing tough non-conference game from your penciled-in schedule for next year?
I would. I mean, why would you bother with those things? And that was something the committee said, we're going to value. We're not going to take, hey, you play FCS teams every year in the non-conference, so you have 1 loss or no loss. If you go out there and you schedule Oklahoma, if you're USC and you play Notre Dame, we're going to give you value for that. If USC, let's say they didn't play Notre Dame, they didn't lose that game, they're a 1-loss Pac-12 champion. Then it's USC versus Ohio State if those 2 teams didn't schedule tough games. So I just think it's totally messed up how they did that.
Now, if you look at the bracket that is out there, though, Clemson and Alabama, Oklahoma and Georgia, what's your initial reaction to those matchups?
Initial reaction is that Clemson will blow the doors off of Alabama, and I don't see how Georgia is going to slow down Baker Mayfield for the simple fact that this Georgia team reminds me of last year's Auburn team that Oklahoma demolished in the Sugar Bowl. So I see a 1 versus 2 Clemson-Oklahoma and go from there. I think that Oklahoma-Georgia game could be a little more interesting. I don't see Clemson-Alabama being all that enticing at all.
Really? Why do you think Clemson has such a clear advantage over Alabama?
I think that Alabama's so banged up, and we saw that down the stretch.
Yeah,
the Mississippi State game was close. Closer than it should have been. Of course, the final game of the season, the Iron Bowl, was a loss. I just didn't like the way they played that final month of the season to say, all right, this team's now going to have a month off, 5 weeks really, because they didn't play in the championship game, and then go out there and win. And Nick Saban teams traditionally wear down throughout the season. That's just kind of his MO. He works his guys so hard in the summer that by the time they get to the end of the season, they're on fumes. And this team is injured and on fumes, so I don't see how it's going to happen.
I feel like I keep playing devil's advocate for Alabama. I don't know how I got into this role where I'm now defending Alabama, but you still have a month for them to get healthier.
Yes.
Nick Saban, with all of that time to game plan, is one of the toughest coaches to coach against. That's not taking away from Clemson and Dabo Swinney. But I think with a month to get some guys healthy or healthier, we could see a little bit of a change there. Obviously, Clemson and Alabama, not 2 teams who are looking for coaches. They're set there, but the carousel in college football in terms of coaching has been just swinging off the handles lately. Jimbo Fisher, we know, has left Florida State for Texas A&M. This was the scene in College Station with Jimbo Fisher getting off the private jet. hail Jimbo Fisher, king of the fiefdom down in College Station. I mean, is he going to be a difference maker for the Aggies?
I mean, when you haven't won a national title in almost 80 years, I guess that's the kind of thing you do for a guy that hasn't even won his conference in 3 years. Is he going to make a difference? I mean, if winning 9-10 games is making a difference, then yeah. Is he going to win national titles, which when you get paid $75 million, you're supposed to do? No. Jimbo Fisher has no ties to Texas. So the smart thing for him would be to go the Matt Rule route, who was hired from Temple to Baylor, and he hired 3 guys from high school staffs in Texas. That would be the smart thing to do for recruiting, and then you would have the A&M money behind you, and you could get the ball rolling. But is he going to walk in there and say, I'm Jimbo Fisher, come to A&M? I mean, people have been trying that, using the A&M brand, the facilities for years now.
Does he get the plane and the band to do it? Does that help?
Kevin Sumlin had the plane. He's flying in the helicopter and the whole thing, and it didn't work for him. So I think that this program is going to win there 8 to 10 games a year. But to say they're now going to get over the hump and win the SEC because Jimbo Fisher's in town, I don't think so.
Well, he has a national championship on his resume, obviously. That was at Florida State. You know that there's a lot of oil money at Texas A&M. The money is not the issue when it comes to the Aggies, but can they recruit? Meanwhile, DeAndre Francois is the quarterback that Jimbo Fisher is leaving behind at Florida State. Do you think Francois is going to transfer?
He was hurt. You saw it on Twitter. He was hurt by the whole thing, the way it went down. Jimbo Fisher didn't say anything, no text, no call. I would hope that he wouldn't. I think it'd be short-sighted to transfer, lose the year. You're going to bring in a really good coach at Florida State. Let's not forget, this is not like UCF and Scott Frost leaving. This is Florida State. You're going to get a really good coach. They're going to hopefully tailor the offense to DeAndre Francois, and he continues his career. You transfer, you got to sit out the year. You set your career back. I don't like the move. I hope he doesn't be short-sighted with that and just stays in Tallahassee and continues to build his career.
You mentioned Scott Frost leaving UCF. He's going to Nebraska, says he wants to have the top offense in the country. What do you make of that hire?
A lot easier said than done. I mean, he played at Nebraska. He's got the ties. It's a feel-good story. But there's no recruits in Nebraska. I mean, outside of the offensive line, there's no recruits. You've got to be able to go down to Texas, and that's what has hurt Nebraska for the last 10 years almost since they left the Big 12. They have lost the pipeline to Texas where they got their skill position players, and they haven't been able to duplicate that with the last couple of hires they've had in Mike Riley. And I don't see it happening. I mean, I think he's going to be really good. The Big 10 West is weak, but is he going to have the best offense in the country? I mean, that's a bold statement for a state that has no skill position players in it.
Didn't spend a lot of time in Florida, but presumably has some ties there after the great season that he had at UCF. Let's clean this up, though. Florida State, we didn't ask you. Who do you think should take over that program?
They're going to have their options.
Yeah.
I mean, do you go to Willie Taggart? You talk about knowing Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew USF. He built that program up, did a great job. I'd be targeting him, getting him back to Florida. It's always about recruiting. You want the guy that knows the players in your backyard. Florida is as talent-rich a state as any in the country, so I would want a guy that knew that area as well as anybody. I'd be going for Willie Taggart, but it's going to be tough to get him out of Oregon.
Yeah, Taggart, Charlie Strong. I know it's got a lot of baggage. Things didn't work out at Texas, but he is a very good coach, and he's back in Florida at USF. Absolutely.
I'd be okay with Charlie Strong. I prefer Taggart, but Charlie Strong, like you said, struggled at Texas, but he's got the ties to Florida as much as anybody. Was a coordinator at Florida, now at USF. He'd do a great job, too.
All right, Pete Mundo, lots to talk about here on this Monday. Thank you.
Anytime.
We're here with SI senior baseball writer Ben Reiter, and Ben, the Yankees have hired their new manager, Aaron Boone, of course, a baseball lifer essentially, but no managerial experience. Why was he the man for the Yanks?
I was frankly a little bit surprised that this was the ultimate call. We saw the list of names as it was developing. A lot of intriguing names on there. Hensley Mullins, Bam Bam, obviously the failed former Yankee phenom, went on to great success as the San Francisco Giants hitting coach, speaks 5 languages. He seemed like a good candidate. When Carlos Beltran's name popped up, seemed like an immediately great candidate. He was considered a manager in the room for the Astros and had done that for the Yankees as well. But look, I think the reason that Brian Cashman picked Aaron Boone was really threefold. One, his age. He was looking for a younger manager to better connect with that young roster in New York. He's 9 years younger than Joe Girardi. 2, his personality. By all accounts, this is a very personable, type of guy, perhaps would get over some of those communication issues that seem to bubble up in New York once in a while. And 3, he does have at least a command of analytics. You know, Girardi did too. But what teams are really looking for is a guy who's able to communicate between the front office and the clubhouse in a very smooth way, all of these high-level ideas and things that they want the players to try. You know, add that to his baseball resume. Obviously, the son of Bob Boone, brother of Brett Boone. It makes a lot of sense.
Of course, we know that this was a little bit of a surprise, a little bit of a dark horse candidate for Aaron Boone. I think what the biggest shock, though, through the Yankee manager search was the fact that Brian Cashman said that he had talked to Alex Rodriguez, that he had sought his advice, maybe, or ran a few things by him with regards to the managerial search. The lines of communication now are clearly open between the Yankees and A-Rod. Can you see A-Rod having some kind of future role with the team?
Perhaps not officially, but I did talk with Brian Cashman during the ALCS about this relationship with Alex Rodriguez, and he said, look, we went through a very tough time. It was tough for everybody. You know, his suspension, the embarrassment he brought to the organization, some not so nice words that Brian Cashman publicly directed at Alex Rodriguez at one point. But at the end of the day, as we saw especially this postseason on the Fox show, Alex Rodriguez is defining his legacy as a Yankee. You know, we saw him kind of bantering, going back and forth with David Ortiz, Yankees, Red Sox. He sees himself in pinstripes forever, and I think that's had some impact on the way the Yankees have seen him. He also has a great baseball mind. And the Yankees be kind of foolish to not at least pick that mind once in a while based on some old hard feelings.
It gets a little easier when J-Lo's essentially your agent.
No, but here's the thing. Yes, a great baseball mind for A-Rod, but I wouldn't say his communication skills and him, you know, navigating the New York media was ever the most seamless thing possible. When I'm looking for my next manager, I'm not sure if I'm getting A-Rod's advice on things. Meanwhile, we're not used to those seeing the Yankees miss out, especially on prospects that they really want. Shohei Ohtani has made his first MLB decision and basically saying no thank you to the Yankees, no thank you to the Boston Red Sox, and a host of other teams. We're hearing that he would like to be in a small market on the West Coast. What would be the best fit?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is really underscoring this is absolutely a one-of-a-kind type of scenario, not just in baseball, but in sports. To have somebody that everybody considers is going to be an instant superstar come in, and kind of money's really not a factor, perhaps because of the contractual situation, the posting agreement with Japan. But he's really just a guy looking for a best fit, and money's not a factor. That's why the Yankees are not in play. It seems as if the finalists are down to 7 teams now. Now, I think that we can cut out 4 of those teams because they're National League teams, and Ohtani wants to hit, and it makes the most sense for him to have the DH spot at his disposal. So the 3 AL teams that are left, if we believe reports, are the Angels, the Rangers, and the Mariners. Now, if you kind of read between the lines all along, the Mariners have seemed very excited about this process all the way through. Obviously, they have strong ties to Japanese baseball, starting with Ichiro, you know, Hisashi Iwakuma. They're a smaller city on the West Coast. I think we can say, for a lot of reasons, the Mariners are the front runner. And this really could be a franchise-changing type of development for a team that does have a lot of talent on board already.
Now, easy transition talking Yankees going to Derek Jeter, of course, new Marlins owner, who's apparently set up a couple of trades for Giancarlo Stanton, one to the Giants, one to the Cardinals, but leaving it up to him, Stanton that is, whether he wants to stay in Miami or go to a more competitive team. If you were Stanton, which of those teams would you choose?
I would choose neither of those teams where I stand. Look, I understand what Derek Jeter and the Marlins are trying to do. They believe they have to dump this enormous contract to move forward financially. But the fact is that Giancarlo Stanton negotiated a no-trade clause. His future is in his hands. He has every right and every reason to decide where he's going to be traded. Now, I spent a lot of time with Giancarlo Stanton in the past. We did an SI cover story on him, the famous one where we body painted him for 18 hours. We had a lot of time to talk.
Yeah, we'll never forget that one. Thank you, Ben.
A lot of time to talk during that process. And I also hung out with him in LA, which is his home. It's where he grew up. He spends every offseason in LA. He would never say this, even at the time, but you don't have to really, you don't have to dig too deep to see that this is a place where he'd like to end up long term. If I'm Giancarlo Stanton, I'm saying the Cardinals are a great organization. I don't want to commit potentially the next, dozen years of my life to living in St. Louis. The Giants, perhaps that's closer, but this is a losing team, and it's not where I want to go. If I were him, I would certainly hold out till I get a trade where I want to go, which I would expect is Los Angeles. And if they don't trade me, oh, well, I'm in Miami making $30 million a year. Life's not so bad.
So Stanton to the Dodgers. After the whole Astros thing, we're holding you to your prediction.
Yeah, right.
I'm not so sure on that. I would say it makes the most sense that he's going to.
It definitely makes the most sense, but this is very interesting because Derek Jeter, I think, has gotten some criticism and praise for some of the changes that he's made to the Marlins since he's taken over and become the face of the franchise. This is an interesting move, though, to try to wrestle away some of the power from a player who has a no-trade clause by saying, listen, if you stay here and you do not go to one of the places that we want you to go, you are going to be on a bad team, and we're going to paint it like it's your fault because you are getting paid so much money that we can't do our jobs. Now, we know that that's only half the truth there, maybe none of the truth there, but that's how Jeter's trying to wrestle back some of the power. It's kind of smart.
It's kind of smart from a public relations standpoint, but I don't think there's much truth to it, first of all, and I don't think that that's how the popular perception of this is going to ultimately fall. Look, I think people realize that this is his contractual right. Like, I know a lot of times fans will side with teams. Cardinals fans will be sore at Stanton. Maybe the Giants will be. But I think everybody understands that he signed this contract. This is well within his right. And I think there's some middle ground whereby he will be able to engineer a trade to the Dodgers. Perhaps there's some, picking up of part of his contract on the Marlins part. But yeah, I see what Jeter's trying to do. But look, in some ways, it's a lot harder to be an owner than to be a major league shortstop.
I also really wouldn't count out the Angels too. We know that they'll take on massive salaries. They've done it in the past. Yeah. You do your annual Writer 50, top 50 free agents. We know you have your ear to the ground on what's going on this offseason. Which team do you think is going to make the biggest move?
Well, there's one team that's in the middle of the Ohtani sweepstakes and in the middle of the Giancarlo Stanton sweepstakes. And they've got a good nucleus, even though they had a horrible team last year. But they've got a good nucleus around which to build maybe one of these superstars. If not, adding some power bats on the free agent market. I think it's going to be a big offseason for the San Francisco Giants. They might not get Ohtani. I think they probably won't. Maybe they'll get Stanton. But they're kind of the one team that's very well set up to take advantage of a free agent market that's become scary to a lot of people in that they really have one gaping deficit in their lineup, and that is power. Right? And we're in an era in which power bats are undervalued. You look at the free agent market, you got J.D. Martinez out there, guys like Jay Bruce, Carlos Gonzalez, Todd Frazier. If the Giants add 2 or 3 of those to Madison Bumgarner and a pretty good pitching staff already, they could be right back in the mix again. I think it's going to be a big offseason, one way or another, for the Giants.
All right, Ben Ryder, appreciate you talking baseball with us in December. That's always a good sign. Thank you.
Hey, we're going downtown, 225 Liberty.
Sports Illustrated.
225 Liberty Street, downtown New York City. You guys are in the Cash Cab. It's a TV game show that takes place right here in my taxi.
That's the real lights.
Oh, man, it's the lights.
It's the real Ben Bailey.
Yeah, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
What's happening, you guys?
Dude, I just saw you at the Comedy Cellar like a few weeks ago.
Oh, awesome.
It was
good?
fun. It was fun.
It's pretty mediocre.
Ben, do you have a favorite sports team?
The New York Football Giants.
Ooh.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oof.
It's all right.
How are you
We
feeling?
have 2 Super Bowls in
That's
my
right.
time.
That's right.
3.
How come you're a Giants fan?
That's a good question.
Wow. It's getting deep in the Cash Cab right now.
Because I'm a Giants fan because my friend had season tickets,
Oh, okay.
and I started going to games with him, and I just had such a great time. All right, here we go. Let's
Yes.
play the game.
All right,
Play
yeah.
the Cash Cab. Here's your first question. It's worth $50. Here we go. Trusting in the wisdom of cheeseheads, what NFL team is collectively owned by its 100,000
Oh, wow.
fans
Hold on.
/ shareholders?
The Green Bay Packers.
Yes, Green Bay Packers is correct.
All right.
It's funny, I've had a few people say, oh, we went to Green Bay and the fans are so nice there. I'm like, well, yeah, that's because they own the team. They want you to come back. All right, you're 1 for 1. Let's see if you can go 2 for 2. Drawing competitors like Spindiana Jones and Oscar de la Minora, MLD, is a national league revolving around what
Oh, I got it.
spinning Jewish top?
It's Major League Dreidel.
Major League Dreidel, is this really a thing? Major League Dreidel?
Dreidel or Major League Dreidel is correct.
Yeah!
I'm like, it has to do something with like the Jewish religion, but I didn't know that that was actually a thing.
Spindiana Jones.
Spindiana
Indiana
Jones.
Jones is clever. I think we might need to do something on that.
You guys are up to $100.
Hey, there we go.
And here is your first $100 question.
Wow.
What boxing strategy did Muhammad Ali famously use to outlast and get past George Foreman in their Rumble in the Jungle?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with rope-a-dope.
Rope-a-dope.
Yes, rope-a-dope, that's correct.
Well, but I'm like, I remember the saying,
yeah.
float like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
I hospitalized a brick. I'm so mean, I make medicine sick. All right, you guys are up to $200. Let's see if you can make it 300. Surpassing Ali, Tiger, and LeBron, what 6'6" athlete now appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated by far the most times?
Oh my God. I have no idea. 6'6"? Oh wait, I think I know who it is. I think I know who it is. I think it's Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan sounds like he's good.
No, but he hasn't been on the cover in a long time because he doesn't work with Sports Illustrated anymore.
5 seconds. Yeah, 6'6".
Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan.
Yes, Michael Jordan is correct.
Pull that one out of the
Oh, the pressure was on.
Oh man, my job was on the line there. Yeah.
All right, you guys are up to $300. Let's see if you can make it 500. These next questions are worth $200 each, and they're a little bit harder. Played with baskets and a pelota, what high-speed indoor sport is popular with crossword constructors due to its many vowels?
Highlight.
Yeah, I think it's highlight. It's gotta be highlight.
Highlight.
Yes, highlight is correct.
Let's go.
Good for $200, and you're up to 500.
Yeah. I sadly only knew of that sport because there's a beer called Highlight.
Yeah.
And then
really?
eventually I Googled what that was, and I was like, oh my God, that's what this sport is called.
All right, you guys are up to $500. Perfect so far, no strikes.
Hell yeah.
We have one more $200 question.
Well, we're going to win no matter
Yeah,
what.
yeah, we got
so
this. Yeah.
pressure's a little off.
Uttered by Al Michaels after an historic 1980 hockey game, what 5-word question did Sports Illustrated deem the greatest sports call of all time?
It's the Miracle on Ice.
Yeah, it's
So
the Miracle. And I just watched
Alright,
Miracle
so-
maybe like 2 weeks ago.
There we go. Great movie. Great movie.
Great game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great game.
Great reality and a
everything.
great movie.
So
about
it's
that
got to be Do
reality.
You Believe in
Do
Miracles?
you
right?
believe in miracles?
Do you believe in miracles? Yeah.
Do you believe in miracles?
Oh, I do, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Nice. Great. That's also our answer, by the way.
Oh, that is
Yeah,
correct! Yes.
there we go. Nice.
Woo!
Wow. 10.
I mean, crushed it.
Well done, you guys. You nailed it.
Yeah.
You got everything right.
Was a devoted Cash Cab watcher. I feel like everything in my life has been leading up to this moment.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Even before Cash Cab even existed, I
nailed
knew
it.
I was waiting for this moment.
You
Yeah.
knew that one day you were destined to
Destined.
answer questions in a moving cab.
I'm curious, who do you think will win the Super Bowl this year?
Well, I know who it won't be. Sorry,
Seriously.
Giants. You left me no other option. I have no idea. I know it's being played in Minnesota, right?
Yeah, well done.
Minneapolis.
That is $50.
That's correct. That's $50 for me.
This is awesome.
Yeah,
We're
thank you
just-
so much, man. Really appreciate it.
much. Nice to meet you.
Nice
Take
to
care,
meet
man.
you.
Thank you very much.
too. Have a good one, guys.
You too.
Oh, here's your money. Don't forget your winnings.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no way!
Do you want to make it rain?
No, that's